Welcome back, my young readers, to another episode of the Action Storybook Bible. In this story, we are going to learn about patience. Now, before we get started, we need to do a little housekeeping. So if you have not subscribed to this channel, I'm inviting you to subscribe right now. I'm opening the doors. And while you're in there doing that, go ahead and click the bell. That way you get a notification every time a new story is posted. And if you like a story, go ahead and smash that button. Let the world know. Now if you're ready, go ahead, sit back, relax, and we'll start our story. God's covenant promise, based on Genesis chapter 15, 17, and 18, and chapters 20 through 22. On a quiet night, a man was gazing at the stars in the sky. Suddenly, God called his name, Abram. God had something very important to tell him. Abram believed in God, and even though Abram was afraid, he was ready to listen. God said, "I will make you into a great nation. You will have as many children as the stars you see in the sky tonight. This is my promise, a covenant I am making between you and me." "But how can this be?" Abram asked. "I don't have even one child, let alone a sky full of them." Abraham told his wife Sarai that God had promised they would be parents. They waited many, many years. In fact, they waited so long that they got old. God spoke to Abram again and changed their names to Abraham, which means God of a multitude, and Sarah, which means princess. One day, 3 visitors appeared and told them God's promise would still come true. Abraham rushed around gathering up the best food he had, and he and Sarah prepared a nice meal for their unexpected guests. When Sarah overheard the visitors tell Abraham that she would have a baby, she laughed. "I am an old woman now," Sarah said. "After all my young years have gone by, how can this happen to me now?" They all heard her laugh, but she denied it because she was scared she would get in trouble. Even though she had laughed about it, Sarah did become pregnant, and about 1 year later, she gave birth to a precious baby boy. Abraham and Sarah named him Isaac, which means he laughs. Isaac grew older, and so did Abraham and Sarah. They kept trusting in God's plan. God tested Abraham's trust. It was a very hard test, the hardest one Abraham would ever face. "Take your son, your one and only son, to the top of the mountain," God said. "Sacrifice him there on an altar." Abraham couldn't believe what he was hearing. He didn't understand, but he packed the supplies for the trip. He took 2 servants and a donkey with him, and he and Isaac headed up the mountain. They went higher and higher. Abraham felt confused, and his heart was heavy. The wood for the offering clattered on the donkey's back. The trail was rough, and the sun was hot. Isaac probably sensed that something just didn't feel right. When they finally got to the top of the mountain, Abraham began unpacking the wood and setting up the altar. "I see the wood," Isaac said, "but where is the sacrifice?" Abraham replied, "God will provide the sacrifice." Can you imagine how Abraham must have felt? But he still kept getting the altar ready, and he kept trusting in God. Isaac lay down on the altar, and Abraham reached for his knife. He knew he had to obey God above everything else, even above his own will. Just in time, God sent an angel of the Lord who said, "Stop, Abraham. I know now that you won't hold back your son, the one I had promised you for so many years." What a huge relief Abraham and Isaac felt when they saw a bush nearby. There, with its horns stuck from the branches, was a ram. The ram would be the sacrifice. God was very pleased with Abraham because he had passed the test. God told Abraham, "Because you have shown me you are faithful, this covenant that I make with you shall be for all time. I will be your God, and you will be my people. I will make you into a great, great nation." When Isaac was older, he married Rebekah, and they had many children, and his children had many children. Soon God's people had indeed grown into a great nation. God had big plans for his people. God kept his promises. Would his people be able to keep their part of the covenant with God? Well, that ends this episode. Abraham and Sarah waited a long time before God's promise of a son came true. They learned to trust God, and they learned to wait for his timing. Even though it was so hard to wait, it was worth it because God's promise was bigger than they could have ever imagined. Until our next episode, my young readers, I am your little darling narrator. Out.